Welcome. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss about the various types of plans. As you know, that planning is an essential activity in any organization. And it is not only an organization, even in every individual human being's life, planning is a part and parcel of the day-to-day activity. This proper planning ensures that the required objective is achieved properly the way it is desired. Planning in fact touches every part or segment of the organization. When a top management makes any planning in any organization, whatever planning they are making is a plan, is a basic plan which encompasses or touches each and every aspect of the functions of the organization. And therefore, there are various kinds of planning. There are various planning made by the various departments and functions in the organization. But basically, when you think of a planning, it can be divided into two basic distinct areas. Number one, if you make a plan which is of short-term nature, we can make a plan which is of long-term nature. We can make a plan which gives us guidance about the strategies to be made, the various steps that are required to take to exist in the environment. And the second kind of planning will be involved in ensuring or implementing those things which has been taken thought about to be implemented. And therefore, the first kind of planning, which is for a long-term period, as well as what gives the ideas about what is to be done, what is to be achieved, what steps are required to be taken, those are strategic planning. And the operational planning involves that how we are going to implement that in the day-to-day activity of the organization. The strategic plans are designed to meet the broad objectives of the organization and to implement the mission. Every organization has got certain objectives. It starts with some mission, the purpose for which the organization is existing, and then they, out of those missions, they bring out certain objectives which are to be fulfilled, which are to be completed, and then this achievement of these objectives will require certain plans on the footprint of which the organizational activity will take into account. And therefore, the strategic plans are basically concerned with designing the broad objectives of the organization, what we want to do, what we are required to do. Secondly, the operational plans that we talk about gives us the details of the steps, the processes that will be involved in implementing those strategic plans which has been formulated to achieve the objectives of the organization. Now, say for example, if we think of the Maruti Udyog, one of the top giant automobile organization of India, when it makes its planning, it first makes its strategic plan. That strategic plan will involve that in the existing scenario, in the coming future, or in the next year or the next 10 years, how much quantity of automobiles they are going to, motor cars they are going to produce in the organization. And to take those decisions, they may have to undergo many processes, many analyses, many comparison, even taking into cognizance the competitors and all that. But then those decisions are the strategic policies, whereas the next thing they will think about is that if given that we decided that this much amount of cars are to be produced in such and such particular year, how we are going to produce it, what processes that require, what technology will involve in that, I mean how the things will be done in the day-to-day working of the organization, that will be seen in the operational planning. So basically you can see that the planning can be divided into two basic categories. Number one, the strategic planning and the operational planning. Strategic planning decides and spells out the objectives of the organization, whereas the operational planning talks about the processes that will be involved, steps that will be taken into the day-to-day operations of the organization to achieve those strategic objectives. Let us now see in detail is what is the strategic planning and operational planning. First, we'll see the strategic planning. Strategic planning, number one, the most important are the initial criteria of strategic planning, that the planning is made for a longer period, that is, it's a long-term planning. As you know, in any organization, the planning can be made for a short term, it can be made for a long term. Short term here means we can make a plan for the next 6 months or the 1 year, whereas we can also make a plan for the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line. So basically, when it is a long-term planning, we call it as a strategic planning. And the second thing, it is a counter planning. Now, let us understand one very essential element of strategic planning. Whereas the planning is simply a blueprint of what we want to do, what we want to achieve. Long-term planning takes into account, the strategic planning takes into account the entire environmental opportunities and constraints around the organization. And when we take into account those constraints and opportunities into account, the plans gets changed because it becomes conditional, it becomes dependent upon those aspects. Say for example, if the situation would have been like this, that in India there is no other automobile organization, only Maruti is selling the cars. The Maruti could have made any kind of planning, they could have produced any kind of automobile and there is no problem. But the question is, when there is a competition, the Hyundai or for that matter any other, the Ford or any other company, they are giving a competition to Maruti. And the consumers are there who are going to compare their cars as well as the car of the Hyundai, the car of the Maruti. So now if a situation is given like this, if one company changes its price, then how it is going to affect Maruti, and Maruti has to think about it. So it has to take into account that if in future the price of the car is reduced by the other company, what steps they are going to take. If tomorrow a new technology they are incorporating in the manufacturing of their car, and if that becomes obvious to the customers, then how Maruti is going to react to that. So over a longer period of time, the basic constraints and problems as well as the opportunities that are going to come. Opportunities here means that if there is a new opportunity comes in the environment, it has to be exploited, and for exploiting that opportunity, various steps and plans are need to be made, and those will involve can be said as a strategic planning. So we can understand a counter planning is that planning which is also depending upon certain factors in the environment, and as a counter we take those plannings. Strategic planning, indeed, it provides answers to the following basic questions which you should think about. Number one is to think, where are we now? And if we are wherever we are now, if we are satisfied with that, then there is no need of further planning. But then if you think that where do we want to go, that what the organization wants to achieve in future, then it has to think about that how much change, how much expansion they want. So according to that, the new steps and new plannings are to be made. So these things will make them change their planning policies. At the same time, if you say that why do you want to go, then there are certain compulsions within the organization. Where do you want to go is something, and why do you want to go is also another aspect of it. If suppose today one organization thinks that the demand position, the total demand in India has been reduced, and if we want to start our venture into some other country, then there is a reason why. So if any organization thinks that there is no sufficient demand, market is available in a particular country, then I am going to make a joint venture into some other country, or I am going to make any direct investment into some other country, that becomes a why, and that becomes a strategy for the organization, keeping in view the future which is coming in the horizon. So therefore, these three basic questions, where we are now, where do you want to go, and why do you want to go, is answered by these strategic planning. Strategic planning helps the management in coping effectively with the future contingencies. As I have said earlier, that if you do not make a planning like that, the future contingencies which are possible to come, which is always possible, and it is the only truth, because the changes come and new contingencies, new constraints, new competition, new threats comes in the environment of the organization, maybe it from the government, maybe it from the competitors, maybe it from the economic conditions of the country, maybe it from the global situation, from anywhere. And a strategic planning helps the management to cope with those things, because management thinks about it, that is what is going to happen in future in advance, and that is the benefit and the beauty of a strategic planning. Let us see the next point, that it provides an early opportunity to correct mistakes. Mistakes are bound to happen. Yes, it happens with everyone and every organization, but if you keep on making planning, then it will come into your horizon that possibly what kind of mistake may happen, and those mistakes, if at all it comes, how are we going to avoid it. It helps the management in making decisions about right things at the right time. Situations are changing every time, and if a new situation suddenly comes into an organization, making a planning at that point of time is a very difficult process, and that may really make a disturbance in the process of the operational process. So it's better to take a decision about the right things at the right times before it really possibly it has happened, with a view that which can happen tomorrow. Understanding what actions to take in order to shape the future as desired. I mean, every organization has got a future. Future is the organization. Today, what is being done, that is almost gone, but the existence of an organization is depending on what's going to happen tomorrow. And when we make a strategic planning, we try to understand, visualize that what possible things can happen tomorrow, what possible shape that we want to give to our organization tomorrow, depending upon the goals, the ambitions, the objectives spelled out, or the mission of the organization. So it helps us to shape that future. The process of shaping that future starts from today by the help of the strategic planning process. So we can conclude from this part of the discussion that a strategic planning basically serves two functions. Number one, it anticipates the future opportunities and threats. That anticipation is very, very important. We must have the vision to what is going to happen tomorrow. And as I have said earlier, there are opportunities and threats in the environment. Environment gives us opportunities. The organization should be able to catch those opportunities, should be able to exploit those opportunities with the help of their own strengths. But then when there is an opportunity, side by side there are threats also. And if there are threats, and if you want to really exploit that opportunity, how can you overcome those threats? That involves strategic planning. That what we are going to do in case such and such problems come. As we've given in our as I talked about in the earlier example, in case of Maruti, the automobile giant, think of another organization, say Intel, which is producing our processors. Now, Intel is always, while making his planning, also taking into consideration other competitors who likely to create certain threats, pose certain threats in the environment, like say AMD, or for that matter any other company who may come up as a new competitor for him. So that anticipation of future opportunity threats is the essence of a strategic planning. It indeed also, as the next function, provides the clarity of purpose and direction. One thing is moving without a direction, without thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow, without any purpose. But the organization, if it moves like that whatever comes in our way, we will just look into it and try to make the solution, and the big organization can really never exist. And therefore, the strategic planning helps us to make our purpose very clear, taking into consideration all the possible events, the threats, problems that may come in the way, and if in that situation comes, in what direction, in what way they're going to solve those things. So the strategic planning definitely gives us these two very important things. That it anticipates the future opportunity states. It provides a clarity of purpose and direction. We have already seen and talked about strategic planning. Every management who wants to run an organization must first make a strategy. But then the strategy in itself is not the end of the story, because strategy is simply a planning. But those strategies are to be realized or implemented, and those implementation is possible through the process of operation in the day-to-day level function of the organization. The operational planning involves those day-to-day operations by which those strategies are possible to be implemented so as to achieve the organizational objectives. The operational level or the operational planning, as you can understand from here, is done more at the lower level. The strategy is done at the top management level. The strategies, the plans are then transmitted to the people down below for implementation, and therefore the operational planning is done at the lower level. Definitely, in comparison to the strategy, which is comparatively more brief, an operational level involves the detailed process and detailed functioning of what is going to be done, so it's more detailed in nature. At the same time, as we have already talked about, operational planning is of short-term nature. The operational planning encompasses the entire organization. Every department, every function has something to do as an operation in the organization, and all are ultimately converging towards achievement of the objectives of the organization. Say, for example, the marketing department has got certain operations to be done, the production department has got some certain operations to be done, human resource department has got certain operations to be done. But then some areas which can include possibly, which generally we do not think about. Number one, the strengthening the research and development function, R&D function. If we are going to make a product, that product must be as per the requirement of the customers, as per expectations of the customers. And at the same time, that means if you want to create something, some product as per the requirement of the customer, you have to make an operation, because our strategy is to make our customers happy, give the best of our services and products to our customers. Then we have to make research and development. So in itself is an operation. At the same time, when you think of the organization to operate, the activities of the organization, the human beings who are engaged in doing those products, or suppose bring a change in the product, we are going to work upon that. We need to motivate people, to motivate the human resource. Even that itself is an operation, because motivation of people is ultimately going to contribute towards the production of the organization. We can also think of an operation creating a climate in the organization that people are willing to take risk. Yes, it's also an operation. The people who are working in the organization, if they are more risk taking, then definitely they are going to take more responsibility. They are going to take more creative ideas and go for the new innovative things, thinking out of the box. And therefore, even creating the climate in the organization where people are willing to take risk is an operation in the organization, is an operational process in the organization. So you can see that an operational planning involves the entire organization, including the production department, where the production process is an operation, that how the production is going to happen, what process will be taken, how the raw materials will come, how the things will be processed, what is the movement, how the movement of the things will take place, and all that. Similarly, marketing department has got certain operations to accomplish. Similarly, HR department or human resource department certain operations to do it. So an operational planning is necessarily is an activity which ultimately makes the happening of what a strategic planning takes into account or makes. Let us now see that how a strategic planning differs from the operational planning. As we have already discussed, that strategic planning is done at the top management, who are responsible for taking the strategic decisions, and those decisions they take After taking into account all the environmental factors, they take all the detailed information of the environment, takes account of their own internal strengths and weaknesses, and taking into account all those things, the top management takes the strategic decisions, whereas an operational planning is an implementation of those strategic decisions which are done at the lower levels. The next difference is strategic planning is mostly concerned with why of things, and why you should do, and what you should do, rather, also what you should do and why you should do, why you want to diversify, why you want to change your product, why you want to extend our operation, business operation to some other parts of the country or other parts of the globe. Whereas the operational planning is concerned with, given those whys and whats, how those are to be done, how those are to be accomplished. That is the part of the operational planning. We have also seen that strategic planning is a long-term activity. We think of the long-term horizon, whereas the operational planning focuses mostly on the short-term aspects, that is day-to-day operation of the business. Strategic planning is less detailed, but operational planning is more detailed, because one has to give all those detailed process things which are required to be done in the operation of the business. Strategic planning provides guidance and boundaries for operational management. Yes, strategic planning is a blueprint of things which you are like to do and which you need to do. So even the boundaries of operation management, that is what we are going to produce. Suppose if any organization is going to make a production of 10,000 units, then that's a boundary set by the strategic planning. But then that achieving those 10,000 units of production is the area of the operational management. So it provides the guidance. Similarly, if suppose we are going to produce a particular product, it is a strategic planning that spells out what kind of quality you should need to achieve, keeping in view the customer's expectations. So the operational department will only ensure that that thing which has been planned for producing for the customer is to be implemented, need to be done. So strategic planning provides guidance and boundaries for the operational management. Strategic planning focuses more on the external environment, whereas the operational planning concerns with the internal environment. As we have talked earlier, while making a strategic planning, an organization has to take into account its entire external environment, that is what is happening in the environment, the opportunities and threats constant which are existing there, which are possible to happen, keeping in view all the environmental factors like competitors, technological environment, economic environment, legal environment, government, the political environment, and so on and so forth. All these things are at certain points of time, it can give certain benefits or opportunities, or also it can give certain threats or constraints. So a strategy will be made, because which can happen tomorrow. When you take into account those things and you make a strategy, it is necessary that those plannings shall be done by taking into account those external environment, and also taking into account what strengths and weaknesses we have got, the organization has got within. But operational planning is not concerned more about the external environment. It is only concerned the internal environment, because what has been thought to be produced, what has been thought to be accomplished, what has been planned to be accomplished, they need to only implement that. And for implementation, the resources which are available within the organization is very important, and those are to be used and in the day-to-day operation of the business. So it is more on the internal environment on which the operational planning is depending. So we can see that strategic and planning and operational planning, they are the two ends of the story. Whereas strategic planning is the beginning, it gives the area, gives the boundaries, gives the ideas and how what should be done, why it should be done. But the operational planning makes simple implementation of that. Now we have already seen the strategic planning and operational planning, which is the most important types of planning in any organization. There we can identify certain other categories of planning in some through certain other points of view. A planning may be called as a tactical planning. As we have seen that a strategic planning spells out what is needed to be done. but then the top level management ultimately transfers it to the lower level management, who are tactical managers, that they need to make certain planning that how they are going to really implement those things which has been already conceived by the top level management. So it involves the implementation of the thing, and for implementation of a thing it requires coordination, how we can get coordination with the people, how we can integrate the entire organization, the functions and departments of the organization, how we are going to take the review, and that whether the organization is going, the functions or the activities of the organization is going in the right direction or not, and those are all involved in the tactical planning. A planning may be formal and informal. The formal planning, whatever you have discussed so far, is a formal planning, that while making a planning you are going to keep into account, keep in view the facts and happenings and in the environment. So a formal planning will involve the careful analysis of all the facts, and those must be documented systematically and rationally, and then making an analysis of that. One can come into the formal planning process. But whereas an informal planning is not supported by any direction, in the sense it can be done anytime, and in any exceptional situation one has to make an immediate planning, which possibly those situations they could not have thought of earlier. Say for example, if any accident happens in any organization, in a say for example in a factory there's some accident happens, some fire breaks out, and immediately one has to make a plan on how we're going to mitigate those risks. Those are plannings which are exceptional situation planning. If tomorrow we have already planned for something which can happen in future, on the basis of the behavior which can be expected from your competitor, but certainly the competitor behaves in an entirely different way, and how we are going to support that situation, how we are going to mitigate that situation, and those will be an informal planning. The functional and corporate planning. A corporate planning takes care of the entire objective, the broad objective of the organization. It is the basic document, the basis. But then out of that emerges out the plans which are required to be made by the functional departments of the organization. A corporate planning is the whole thing, that's a guidance, that is the Bible of the organization, which is from which the roots of the planning from the other departments, the functions are comes out. So functional planning relates to the functional departments or units of an organization, and it takes care of the functional or departmental objectives, which in turn ultimately going to take care of the whole corporate planning. So if marketing department has got its own planning, production department has got its own planning, the HR department has got their own planning, although all of their planning must be in consonance with the terms and things which has been prescribed in the strategic planning. So these are the functional planning, but the basic planning, which is the corporate planning. A planning may be proactive and reactive planning, and indeed we must understand this is a very important concept in today's time. I mean, one kind of planning is possibly that if something has happened in the environment, my competitor is behaving in a particular way, competitor is taking some particular price, competitor is giving a particular type of quality, then the organization thinks is we must also do that. I mean, something which has already happened, we must try to achieve it, come up to that level. If my competitor is achieving this particular level or maintaining this particular level, I must also maintain that level. But this is known as the reactive planning. The things, a planning which is made as a reaction to something which happens in the environment. But truly a leader organization, a good organization, a forward-looking organization will not only take into what has happened, they will look on the horizon and see what possibly can happen tomorrow, what new ideas can come tomorrow, what new problems may come tomorrow. So visualizing those things which has not yet happened and try to make a plan on that is the proactive planning. So reactive planning is done as a response to the environmental forces. The proactive planning is done keeping in view the possible happenings in the future. Now we will see what are the various elements which are involved in a planning. Most of you are already aware of. Number one, in planning there must be a mission. The mission spells out the philosophy and the basic purpose on which premises the organization is existing. because it is the only thing on the basis of which everything else is going to be evolved. So there must have a mission first before a planning is made. Next thing, a planning will make certain policies are the guidance as to how one should think, how one should act in an organization in the process of the decision making or taking actions. So even one has to make a plan for the various policies which is required to be made in the organization. The planning will involve defining certain procedures as to the various activities and operations which people are going to take or going to do or going to be involved in. So it suggests the detailed process for the performance of the operation. If it is done, thought beforehand, then the possible mistakes can be removed. Another element in planning is making the rules, that how a definite action is needed to be taken in a definite situation. Those becomes guidance for the people who are working in the organization to follow. So one has to make a plan that what kind of rules that you are going to make, how we are going to make our rules. While making planning, one has to think of the programs also, that what different programs that you are going to do. As we have seen that all these things what we have talked about earlier, rules, procedure, policies, these are in a way the programs. A comprehensive plan to achieve specific objectives includes the objectives, policies, procedures, methods, standards and budget. That how we are going to do it, how we are going to make our policy, what process, which programs will be involved in that, how we are going to make our procedures, how we are going to evolve our methods, standards, in what mode, in what way. Those are the various programs that is to be decided by the planning premises. And another important thing in the planning is the budget, which is very important. For running any organization, the various expenditures, income or results in the organization will be reflected in the budget. These are the plans and statements of expected results are expressed in the numerical term. It is actually in the numerical term that what we are going to achieve as a result, what expenses we are going to make, a numerical expression of those, because this becomes very important, because this involves money and this involves the profitability of the organization. So in a financial planning, yes, all those kinds of things will be involved, which is an integral part of any planning process. So let us recapitulate what you have done in this particular lecture. Broadly, planning is classified into strategic planning and operational planning. Strategic planning gives us the blueprint of what we are going to do. It is done at the highest top level management. It is done for the long term. Whereas the operational planning is for the short term, and it involves the day-to-day operation of the business. Strategic planning relates to the broad object of the organization. It's a long term. Counter planning and futuristic, which is important to be noted about. It's a counter planning in response to things which are happening and in the future. Strategic planning ensures maintaining the competitive advantage. Competitive advantage in a competition, organization has to see which are the areas where if you can excel or we excel, how we can really use that to mitigate the competition in the market. So it has to make its own strategy, then what way we are going to deal with our competitors and what we are going to win our competitors. So strategic planning is gives us that competitive advantage. Even developing their own strength or removing their weaknesses is a part of the strategic planning. Operational planning relates to day-to-day performance and is more detailed, as you have seen. There may be other kinds of planning, which is tactical, formal, informal, functional, corporate, proactive and reactive. The various elements of planning that also we have seen are the mission, the policies, the procedure, the rules, programs and budgets. Thank you very much.